The overhead lights in Trauma Bay 3 at Boston General buzz at a frequency I've memorized after 9 years of 12-hour shifts. It's 2:14 a.m. on a Thursday in October, and my phone is vibrating against my hip before I've even finished my coffee. Code red. Multi-vehicle collision on Starro Drive. ETA 6 minutes. My name is Dr. Evelyn Sterling, though nobody at this hospital knows me by that name. On my badge, on my medical license, on the brass plate outside my office, I'm Dr. Evelyn Marsh, my mother's maiden name, the one I filed for at the Suffolk County Probate Court on March 3, 2019, 3 weeks after my family signed a notarized statement claiming I had fabricated a mental health crisis to extort money from them. I'm 34 years old. I run the cardiothoracic trauma unit at one of the top-ranked hospitals in New England, and I thought I understood betrayal until the exact moment my sister's biotech company issued a press release describing me as a former research assistant with a documented history of professional jealousy and instability. That was 5 years, 2 months, and 11 days ago. I know the number because I count it the way some people count sobriety. Tonight, I'm not thinking about any of that. I'm pulling on gloves, running triage protocols through my head, listening to the trauma pager crackle with details. Female, mid-30s, unrestrained driver, high-speed impact, suspected aortic injury, blood pressure dropping. My chief resident, a sharp kid named Dr. Priya Anand, is already prepping the OR upstairs. Dr. Marsh, incoming in 90 seconds, the charge nurse calls. I don't look up from the chart I'm scanning. This is the part of my job I never explain well to people outside medicine, the way panic disappears the moment the doors swing open. There's no room in a trauma bay for anything except the next 90 seconds. The ambulance doors slam. Paramedics wheel in a gurney, and I move toward it the way I've moved toward hundreds of patients before her. Blood-soaked auburn hair. A designer coat cut open at the sleeve. A face I haven't seen in 5 years, 2 months, and 11 days, now gray and slack beneath an oxygen mask. Victoria Sterling. My sister. I don't stop moving. I don't let my hands shake. 12 years of training doesn't evaporate because the patient on my table shares my blood. BP 78/40, heart rate 130 and climbing, the paramedic reports. Suspected traumatic aortic dissection from steering wheel impact. She was conscious at the scene, now unresponsive. Get her to imaging, then straight to OR 2, I say, and my voice comes out level, clinical, the voice I use for strangers. I need a type and cross 6 units and call Dr. Vance. I want him scrubbed in as backup. Behind me, I hear the hospital's automatic doors part again, and this time it's not paramedics. It's my mother, Eleanor Sterling, in a cashmere coat thrown over pajamas, and my father, Arthur Sterling, gripping her elbow like she might collapse. They are exactly as I remember them, poised even in crisis, the kind of people who worry about appearances at the worst possible moments. Where is she? Where is my daughter? My mother is shouting at the front desk. Do you know who we are? Do you know who Victoria Sterling is? Get me the best surgeon in this hospital right now. I hear Dr. Marcus Vance's voice cut through the chaos, calm as always. Mrs. Sterling. She's already in there. I don't hear what happens after that. I'm already through the doors of the OR, and the only sound that matters now is the rhythm of a failing heart on a monitor, and the voice of my anesthesiologist counting down sedation levels. Victoria Sterling, the sister who stole a $50 million patent from my hands and told our parents I'd invented it out of jealousy, is unconscious on my table, and her life depends entirely on whether my hands remember how to save the people who tried to erase me. Let me back up because none of this makes sense without understanding what happened 7 years before that October night. I grew up in a house on Beacon Hill with 11-foot ceilings, and a portrait of my grandfather hanging above a fireplace that hadn't been lit since I was 12. My parents, Arthur and Eleanor Sterling, built their standing in Boston's old money circles through my father's private equity firm, and my mother's seat on 3 museum boards. Appearances were currency in that house. Victoria understood this instinctively. I never did. Victoria was born radiant, the kind of charisma that made teachers forgive her missed homework, and made my parents forgive everything else. She was groomed from age 6 for one job, carrying the Sterling name forward. I was the strange younger daughter who filled notebooks with anatomical diagrams, and spent summer vacations shadowing cardiologists, instead of attending the Cape Cod Regatta circuit. By the time I was finishing my surgical residency at Massachusetts General in 2018, I had co-developed something I believed could change cardiac care, a self-expanding valve design that reduced rejection rates in a way nothing on the market did. I had 11 months of data, 3 published abstracts, and no funding. Victoria had just launched Sterling Biovantage, a biotech startup she'd built almost entirely on charm, and her Rolodex of investors. I made the worst decision of my life on a Tuesday afternoon in April 2018. I showed her my research. I trusted her because she was my sister. I didn't ask her to sign anything. I didn't think I needed to. 4 months later, Sterling Biovantage announced a $50 million Series A round built around a revolutionary proprietary cardiac valve technology, filed under a patent listing Victoria Sterling as sole inventor. My design. My 11 months of data. My name nowhere on the paperwork. When I confronted her, quietly in her office, asking only that she add my name to the patent and give me a fair equity stake, she looked at me with an expression I still see when I close my eyes some nights. Not guilt. Calculation. 3 weeks later, my parents' attorney sent a certified letter to my apartment. Inside was a notarized family statement, signed by Arthur and Eleanor Sterling, stating that I had a documented history of fabricating claims for financial gain, that I was estranged by mutual family decision, and that I was permanently removed from the Sterling Family Trust, effective immediately. Attached was a psychiatric evaluation I never took, from a doctor I'd never met, paid for, I later learned, by Victoria's company account. I lost my funding for a fellowship that had been contingent on family sponsorship. I lost my apartment, which my parents had been subsidizing. I lost every relative who'd known me since birth, all of whom received the same letter, and believed it without asking me a single question. What I didn't lose was Dr. Marcus Vance. He was the chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Boston General, a man who'd noticed my hands in the OR before he ever asked my last name. When he heard what had happened, not the details, just that I'd been cut off and was working 3 jobs to finish my fellowship, he didn't ask me to explain myself. He offered me a research position with housing assistance and told me something I've never forgotten: your family's opinion of you is not a medical credential. I legally changed my professional name that spring. I married Julian Croft, an investigative journalist I'd met at a hospital fundraiser, 11 months later. Julian was the one who insisted we document everything, every email, every draft of my original patent research, every dated file, not for revenge, he said, for protection. I didn't understand then how right he'd turn out to be. For 5 years, I built a life with no Sterling name attached to it. I became the youngest cardiothoracic surgeon to lead a trauma unit in the hospital's history. I stopped flinching when I saw Victoria's face on business magazine covers, describing herself as a self-made innovator. I told myself I was done. And then, on an October night in 2025, a car with Sterling Biovantage's logo on the dashboard camera crashed into a guardrail on Starrow Drive doing 61 miles per hour, and the woman who erased me arrived on my operating table with a torn aorta and 40 minutes to live. I make the first incision at 2:41 a.m. Behind the glass observation window, I can see my mother's hand pressed flat against the pane, and for the first time in 5 years, 2 months, and 11 days, I watch Eleanor Sterling look at me like she's seeing a ghost she buried herself. I don't stop cutting. Because in exactly 11 minutes, when I clamp the torn section of Victoria's aorta and Priya calls out that we're losing pressure, I'm going to discover something in her chest cavity that has nothing to do with the car crash, and everything to do with why she was driving 61 miles per hour toward an investor meeting she was never going to make. 11 minutes into the operation, Priya's voice cuts through the steady beep of the monitors. Pressure's dropping again, 68/35. We're losing her. I don't answer right away. My hands are already moving, retracting tissue, exposing the tear in Victoria's aortic wall, a jagged 3 cm split from blunt force trauma against the steering column. This is the moment every cardiothoracic surgeon trains for and dreads in equal measure. One wrong angle with the clamp and she bleeds out in under 2 minutes. Clamp, I say, and Priya places it in my palm without hesitation. I've trained her well enough that she doesn't ask questions when my voice goes flat like this. She doesn't know the woman on the table is my sister. Nobody in this room knows that, except Dr. Marcus Vance, who is standing at my shoulder, silent, watching my hands the way he's watched them for 7 years, checking for the tremor that would mean I need to step back. There isn't one. I place the clamp. The bleeding slows to a controlled trickle. For a moment, the room exhales. Graft, I say, and the anesthesiologist reads out vitals in a rhythm that starts to steady. This is the part of surgery nobody outside medicine understands, how mechanical it becomes, how the body in front of you stops being a person and becomes a problem to be solved, one suture at a time. It's the only reason I'm able to keep working. If I let myself think about the fact that Victoria's face, slack under anesthesia, is the same face that once cried real tears in front of our parents while accusing me of extortion, my hands would stop. So I don't think about it. I count sutures. It's when I'm repairing the section just below the tear, working through scar tissue that shouldn't be there, old scar tissue, surgical scar tissue, from a procedure that isn't in any chart we've been given, that I stop. Priya, pull her file again, I say. Full surgical history. I want to know what this is. There's a thin, silvery line of old suturing along the inner arterial wall, barely visible, professionally done, nothing like trauma scarring. Someone operated on my sister's heart before tonight. Recently. And there's no record of it anywhere in the intake paperwork the EMTs handed us. Nothing in the system, Priya says, scanning the tablet. No prior cardiac procedures on file for Victoria Sterling, not at this hospital, not flagged in the regional network. Dr. Vance leans in slightly, studying the tissue. That's a valve repair, he says quietly, so only I can hear. Recent. 6 months, maybe less. I know exactly what that means, and for the first time since the ambulance doors opened, my hands go still for half a second too long. The valve I designed 7 years ago wasn't just a concept on paper. It was engineered to correct a very specific structural weakness, the kind of weakness that, left untreated, causes exactly the sort of catastrophic tear I'm looking at right now. Sterling Biovantage's flagship product, the one that made Victoria a cover story on 3 business magazines, the one funded by $50 million that should have had my name on the patent, was never fully validated in human trials. I know this because Julian spent the last 2 years quietly tracking Biovantage's regulatory filings for a story he never got permission to run. Victoria didn't just steal my design. She used an unapproved version of it on herself. Get me imaging on the valve, I say. I want to know exactly what's been done here before I close. 40 minutes later, with Victoria stabilized, sedated, and moved to recovery under a guarded prognosis, I strip off my gloves in the scrub room and stare at my hands under the water for longer than necessary. Marcus doesn't say anything. He just hands me a towel and waits, because he's known me long enough to understand that I need 30 seconds of silence before I can be a person again instead of a surgeon. She's stable, he finally says. You did good work in there, Evie. She had a valve repair done in the last 6 months, I say. Unregistered. No paperwork, no hospital record, nothing in her insurance history. Someone did that procedure off the books. Marcus's jaw tightens. He was the one who reviewed my original research 7 years ago, before any of the theft happened. He knows exactly what that scar tissue means. You think she used your design on herself? I think she needed to know it worked before she used it on patients, I say. Which means Biovantage's flagship product might be built on a foundation that was never actually validated. Before he can answer, the scrub room door opens, and Julian is standing there in a coat thrown over pajama pants, his press badge still clipped to his collar from a story he must have abandoned mid-write when I called him. My husband has the particular calm of someone who has spent a decade interviewing people in the worst moments of their lives, but even he looks unsettled tonight. Your mother is outside, he says. She's been asking every nurse in the hallway who the lead surgeon was. Someone already told her. I close my eyes. Where's my father? Sitting. Not saying much. Julian hesitates. Evie, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it before you walk out there. I already don't like the tone of his voice. Julian doesn't do dramatic pauses unless what's coming next is going to change the shape of the room. I've had a source inside BioVantage's compliance office for 4 months, he says. Ever since the SEC opened a quiet inquiry into their manufacturing claims. I wasn't going to tell you until I had it confirmed, because I didn't want you carrying it around if it turned out to be nothing. Tell me now, I say. Victoria's company is failing, Evie. Not publicly, not yet. But internally, the valve design has a structural flaw under sustained cardiac stress. 3 of the 12 patients in their limited trial have had complications. 1 died in April. They buried it in a non-disclosure settlement with the family. The room feels very quiet. She knew, I say, and it isn't a question. She's known for at least 8 months, Julian says. My source says she's been trying to locate the original research files, your files, because whoever adapted your design for BioVantage's manufacturing process introduced an error in the mounting mechanism. Something only the original inventor would know how to correct. She's been looking for me, I say slowly, and something cold moves through my chest that has nothing to do with the 11-hour shift I've just worked. She's been looking for Dr. Evelyn Marsh, Julian corrects. She doesn't know Dr. Evelyn Marsh is you. Not yet. But she's had 2 private investigators trying to track down the original patent co-inventor for the past 6 weeks. Marcus is watching this exchange with the expression of a man realizing the puzzle in front of him is bigger than the surgery he just assisted. She was driving to an investor meeting tonight, he says slowly. At 61 miles an hour, in the rain, at 1 in the morning. She wasn't driving to an investor meeting, Julian says quietly. My source confirmed it 20 minutes ago, right before I got here. She was driving to serve legal papers. Against you. A civil suit alleging that the original patent research was stolen from BioVantage, not the other way around. She was going to file first, publicly, and frame the narrative before anyone could question her. I stand in that scrub room, water still dripping from my hands onto the tile floor, and understand for the first time that Victoria wasn't in that car by accident. She was racing toward a courthouse to destroy what was left of my name before I could ever find out what she'd done to build her empire on top of the wreckage of mine. And in less than an hour, when she wakes up in recovery and opens her eyes to see me standing over her hospital bed in scrubs, she is going to have absolutely no idea that the sister she buried 5 years ago now holds every piece of evidence needed to bury her back. Through the small window in the scrub room door, I can see my mother pacing the hallway, still unaware that the surgeon, who just saved her daughter's life, is the daughter she legally erased. She's about to find out. And when she does, the version of events she's told herself for 5 years is going to collapse in front of the entire hospital. My mother sees me before I see her. I step out of the scrub room still in my surgical cap, the fluorescent hallway lights harsh after the dim focus of the ore, and I hear the sharp intake of breath before I hear my name, my real name, the one nobody at this hospital has spoken aloud in 5 years. Evelyn. Elinor Sterling is standing outside the recovery ward, one hand braced against the wall, her cashmere coat slipping off one shoulder. She looks smaller than I remember. 5 years does that, I suppose, even to people who spent a lifetime perfecting the art of never looking diminished. My father is beside her, and for a moment neither of them speaks, because I don't think either of them believed, until this exact second, that the surgeon who'd just spent 3 hours with her hands inside their daughter's chest was the daughter they'd spent 5 years pretending didn't exist. You're the surgeon, my mother says. It isn't a question. It's disbelief trying to reorganize itself into a sentence. I'm the attending on your daughter's case, I say. My voice comes out steady, professional, the same tone I'd use with any family in this hallway. Victoria is stable. The aortic repair was successful. She'll be moved to the cardiac ICU within the hour. Evelyn. My father says my name like it costs him something. We didn't know. When they said Dr. Marsh, I changed my name, I say. Legally. In 2019. Around the same time you signed a document stating I didn't exist. I watched that land. My mother's hand comes up to her mouth. Whatever version of tonight she'd constructed in her head on the drive over, the version where a stranger's skilled hands saved her daughter, and she could go back to the story she'd been telling herself for 5 years, dissolves in front of the recovery ward doors. We can discuss all of that later, my father says, and there it is, the same reflex I remember from every uncomfortable dinner of my childhood: manage the optics first, feel things later, if at all. Right now, we just need to know Victoria's going to be all right. She's going to survive, I say. Whether she's going to be all right is a longer conversation. I don't elaborate. I don't tell them, standing in this hallway at 4 in the morning, about the unregistered valve repair I found stitched into their daughter's arterial wall, or the fact that Julian's source inside BioVantage has spent months tracing a fatal design flaw that Victoria has known about for 8 months and quietly buried. That conversation is coming, but not here, not under fluorescent lights with my mother's mascara running, and my father checking his phone out of habit even now. Marcus appears at my side before either of them can say anything else. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, I'm Dr. Marcus Vance, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. Your daughter is in exceptional hands. Dr. Marsh is the finest surgeon I've trained in 20 years of practice. There's a particular kind of silence that happens when two versions of reality collide, and I watch it happen across my mother's face. The woman who signed papers calling me unstable and dangerous now hearing a man with 3 medical society chairmanships describe me as exceptional. I'd like to see her, my mother says. She's sedated. You can see her in the ICU once she's settled, but she won't be conscious for several hours. I glance at my watch out of habit, though I already know the time. I need to finish my post-op notes. There's a family consultation room down the hall, if you want to wait somewhere quieter than this corridor. I turn to walk away, and my mother's voice catches me from behind, quieter than I've ever heard it. Evelyn, wait. I stop but don't turn around immediately. There's a version of me, the 29-year-old who packed her apartment into a rental car after the disownment letter arrived, who would have turned around hoping for an apology. That version of me doesn't work in this hospital anymore. I need to check on my patient, I say, and I walk toward the nurse's station without looking back. Julian is waiting for me in my office an hour later with 2 cups of coffee and his laptop already open. He doesn't say anything about my parents. He knows better than to make me talk about it before I'm ready. I got confirmation from my source, he says instead. The lawsuit Victoria was planning to file, it names you specifically. Dr. Evelyn Marsh, formerly known as Evelyn Sterling. She'd already identified you. The private investigators found the name change filing at Suffolk County 3 weeks ago. So she knew, I say. She knew I was in Boston. She knew what hospital. And instead of contacting me, she filed papers to sue me for stealing my own research. She was building a preemptive narrative, Julian says. If she files first, publicly, alleging that you're the one who took proprietary data from BioVantage, then when the truth eventually surfaces, that the valve design is flawed and traces back to her theft of your work, she gets to control the story. She becomes the victim of an unstable former employee trying to extort a successful company. It's the same playbook she used with your parents 7 years ago. She was about to run it again, this time in federal court. I sit down slowly, the coffee cooling in my hands. She was driving to serve me papers at 1 in the morning. She was driving to a document courier service that operates 24 hours, near the courthouse, Julian confirms. My source says the filing was scheduled to go live first thing this morning, timed to coincide with a press release. She wanted it in the news cycle before you had a chance to respond. I think about the surgical scar I found in her chest, the valve repair done off the books, the death of a trial patient buried under a non-disclosure settlement. Victoria wasn't just protecting a company anymore. She was protecting herself from something that could put her in front of a grand jury. What happens to the lawsuit now? I ask. Now that she's in an ICU bed instead of a courthouse. That's the thing, Julian says, turning his laptop toward me. It's already filed. Her legal team submitted it electronically at 1:47 a.m., 20 minutes before the accident. It's sitting in the docket right now. Unless she withdraws it, or unless someone challenges it with contradicting evidence, it moves forward with or without her consciousness. I stare at the screen, at the case number, at my own name typed out in a legal filing accusing me of industrial espionage against my own sister. I have every original file, I say quietly. Every dated research note. Every early draft with both our names on it, from before she cut me out. I have the emails where she asked me to send her the specifications. I have 7 years of documentation you insisted I keep. I know, Julian says. I've had it organized in a secure archive since the year we got married. I told you it wasn't for revenge. It was for exactly this moment. He pauses. But Evie, there's something else. Something bigger than the patent theft. He turns the laptop screen fully toward me, and I see a document I don't recognize, an internal BioVantage engineering memo, dated 8 months ago, marked confidential. This is what my source pulled last week, Julian says. It's the internal report on the valve failure. Victoria's own engineering team flagged the mounting flaw in February. They told her in writing that the design needed to be pulled from active trials immediately. She overrode them. She kept it in trials for 3 more months, because a competitor was about to announce a similar product and she needed to maintain her lead in the market. I read the memo twice, and something in my chest goes cold in a way that has nothing to do with fatigue. The patient who died in April, I say slowly. The one in the settlement. Was implanted with the flawed valve 6 weeks after Victoria was told in writing that it wasn't safe, Julian says. She had the evidence in her own inbox and chose the company's market position over a patient's life. I set the memo down on my desk and look toward the window, where the first gray light of dawn is starting to touch the Boston skyline. Somewhere in this building, my sister is unconscious in an ICU bed, alive because I chose to save her before I chose anything else. Down the hall, my parents are waiting in a consultation room, still operating under 5 years of assumptions about who destroyed this family. She's going to wake up in a few hours, I say. And she's going to find out that the surgeon who saved her life has a memo proving she let a patient die to protect a stock valuation. That's not all she's going to find out, Julian says, and something in his voice makes me look up. My source flagged one more thing in the compliance files. Something about the original funding round. About where the $50 million actually came from. He hesitates, and for the first time all night, my calm, unshakable husband looks genuinely uncertain about how to say what comes next. Julian. What is it? The lead investor in Sterling BioVantage Series A round, he says slowly, wasn't an outside venture firm like the press releases always claimed. It was a private trust. Set up in 2018, funded with an initial contribution of $12 million, and managed on behalf of 2 beneficiaries. Whose trust? Julian meets my eyes. Yours, Evie. It's structured as the Sterling Family Legacy Trust, the same trust your parents cut you out of in the disownment letter. The same trust that, according to the original 2015 documents, was supposed to split equally between you and Victoria the moment either of you turned 30. The coffee cup in my hand goes very still. They didn't just steal my research, I say slowly, understanding arriving in pieces. They used my own inheritance to fund the company built on top of it. And they backdated the trust modification removing your name, Julian says, 3 weeks after they filed it. Which means, legally, when they cut you off, they may have already committed fraud. Down the hallway, I hear the automatic doors of the ICU open, and a nurse's voice calls out, urgent and sharp. Dr. Marsh, Victoria Sterling is coding. I'm through the ICU doors before the nurse finishes the sentence. VFib, 60 seconds ago, the charge nurse reports as I reach the bedside, already snapping on gloves. BP crashed to 60/30, then the rhythm went chaotic. I look at the monitor. Victoria's heart is quivering instead of beating, a dangerous, useless flutter that will kill her in minutes if we don't stop it. Whatever fear I might have carried into this room about the memo Julian just showed me, about the trust fund, about the dead trial patient, none of it exists anymore. There's only the rhythm on the screen, and the seconds ticking against it. Charge to 200, I say. Clear. The first shock does nothing. Victoria's body jerks, then settles back into the same dangerous tremor. I think, for half a second, about the scar tissue I found during surgery, the unregistered valve repair, the flawed mounting mechanism Julian's memo described in clinical, damning detail. It's possible the very device meant to save her is what's killing her now. Charge to 300. Clear. The second shock finds its rhythm. The flutter on the monitor resolves into something ragged but real, a heartbeat, weak and irregular, but a heartbeat. I don't allow myself to feel anything about it yet. Push amiodarone, 300 milligrams. I want continuous rhythm monitoring, and I want cardiology page the moment she's stable enough for an echo. It takes 11 more minutes before Victoria's vitals settle into something resembling safety. When they do, I stand at the foot of her bed, watching the numbers hold steady, and I let myself breathe for the first time since the alert went out. That valve, Marcus says quietly, arriving beside me, having clearly run from wherever he'd been. The one you found during the repair. You think that's what caused the arrhythmia? I think the mounting flaw in her own company's design just tried to kill her, I say. The same flaw she was told about 8 months ago and buried anyway. I don't say anything else, because there's a version of this moment that could tip into something ugly and satisfying, and I refuse to let myself feel satisfaction over a heart monitor. I became a surgeon to save lives, not to keep score. So I do what I trained a decade to do. I make sure she's stable. I order the imaging. I stay at her bedside until her vitals hold through 2 full monitoring cycles. It's almost 9 a.m. when Victoria finally opens her eyes. She's disoriented at first, the way most patients are after cardiac arrest, pupils slow to focus, throat raw from the breathing tube we removed 20 minutes ago. Then her eyes find me, standing at the foot of her bed in scrubs, and I watch recognition arrive in stages. Confusion. Disbelief. Something that might be shame, quickly smoothed over by the same practiced composure she's used her entire life to survive uncomfortable moments. Evie, she says, her voice cracked. You did this. You saved me. I repaired a torn aorta and stopped a VFib arrest caused by a structural flaw in a device your own engineers warned you about in February, I say. My voice stays level, clinical, the same voice I've used all night. Yes. I saved you. Something flickers across her face, an old instinct, I think, the reflex to perform vulnerability until it produces the reaction she wants. I've thought about reaching out for years, she starts. I know what I did was. Don't, I say, not unkindly, but with a finality that stops her mid-sentence. I'm not here for an apology, Victoria. I'm here because I'm your surgeon, and because I found something in your chest last night that I need to explain to you, medically, before anyone else does. I tell her about the unregistered repair. About the mounting flaw. I watch her face go pale in a way that has nothing to do with blood loss, because she already knows what I'm describing. She's known for 8 months, and the only thing that's changed is that now the person telling her about it is the sister she spent 5 years erasing. You had it fixed in secret, I say. Off the books, no hospital record, because you couldn't risk anyone connecting your own procedure to the same flaw killing your trial patients. You needed to know if the design could be corrected before you went public with the failure. How do you? Because I designed the original valve, Victoria. I know exactly what a mounting failure in that architecture looks like, because I spent 11 months preventing it before you patented my work under your name. The room goes quiet except for the steady beep of the monitor. For the first time since I stepped into this hospital room, Victoria doesn't have a performance ready. There's a filing sitting in federal court right now with your name on it, I continue. A civil suit accusing me of stealing proprietary research from your company. Filed 20 minutes before your accident. I assume the timing wasn't a coincidence. You knew I was in Boston, you knew where I worked, and you decided to sue me before I could ever find out what you'd built on top of what you took. Evie, I can withdraw that filing this morning, I promise you. You will withdraw it, I say. Today. And you're going to sign something else. I set a folder on the tray table beside her bed, the documents Julian and I finalized at 6 this morning, after Victoria's rhythm had stabilized, and I had a moment to think clearly for the first time in 5 years. Inside is everything, the original dated patent research with both our names on the early drafts, the internal engineering memo warning her about the flaw, the death of the trial patient buried under an NDA, and the paperwork proving the Sterling Family Legacy Trust, my inheritance, funded her company's Series A round before it was fraudulently modified to remove my name. I'm not interested in destroying you, Victoria, I say. I had that option on the table last night, and I chose to save your life instead. But I am done being erased so you can keep building an empire on a foundation you stole from me. You're going to sign the patent rights back to their rightful co-inventor. You're going to issue a corrective disclosure to your investors and the FDA about the valve flaw before one more person gets hurt. And you're going to tell our parents the truth about what actually happened 7 years ago. Victoria stares at the folder for a long moment before her hands, still weak from surgery, reach for it. And if I don't? Then Julian publishes everything he's spent 2 years documenting, my legal team files a countersuit backed by 7 years of dated evidence, and the FDA gets the engineering memo showing you buried a fatal design flaw to protect a funding round. Your choice. I pause at the door. Your heart belongs to you, Victoria. But the stitches keeping it beating this morning belong to me. I'd remember that. My parents are waiting in the family consultation room when I walk out, exactly where I left them 6 hours earlier, though it's clear neither of them has slept. My mother stands the moment she sees me. Is she? She's stable. She's going to recover. I close the door behind me and set a second folder on the table between us, copies of everything, the trust documents, the backdated modification, the fraud that quietly funded my sister's company with my own inheritance while I was working 3 jobs to survive. I watch my father's face change as he reads the first page. My mother doesn't reach for hers. She already knows what's inside it. You used my trust to fund her company, I say. Then you backdated the paperwork removing my name, and told the entire family I fabricated a crisis for money. I have spent 5 years building a life without any of you, and I did it without your name, your money, or your permission. I don't need anything from either of you now. Evelyn, we were protecting the family. You were protecting Victoria, I say. There's a difference, and it took me 5 years and a trauma bay to understand it. I don't raise my voice. I don't need to. There's a particular kind of power in saying the truth plainly, without performance, to people who spent a lifetime performing for everyone else. I set a single sheet on top of the folder, a public retraction, drafted by Julian overnight, correcting the record among the exact social and medical circles they used to destroy my reputation 7 years ago. You'll sign this, I say. Not because I need your apology. Because I need my name back the way it actually happened. 3 weeks later, Victoria's corrective disclosure goes public, alongside a quiet, unannounced settlement with the family of the trial patient who died in April. The patent rights transfer back to a joint filing under both our names, though I never intend to touch the royalties. Sterling BioVantage survives, barely, under new leadership neither Victoria nor my parents control. I don't attend the press conference. I'm in an operating room that morning, closing the chest of a 19-year-old with a congenital defect, doing the work I actually love, the work that was never about anyone's approval but my own. That evening, Julian is waiting outside the hospital when my shift ends, 2 coffees in hand, the same way he's waited for me 100 mornings before this one. I don't tell him about the conversation with Victoria, or the look on my mother's face when she signed the retraction. Some things don't need retelling. They just need to be behind you. You okay? He asks, handing me the cup. I think about the 5 years I spent building a name nobody could take from me twice. I think about a scalpel, a torn aorta, and a choice I made in less than a second that had nothing to do with forgiveness, and everything to do with who I decided to become after they tried to erase me. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, I say, and we walk out into the cold Boston evening together, leaving the hospital lights behind us.